Welcome, folks. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so glad you are here. Welcome to the humans who are arriving on screen. Welcome, and welcome to our more than human guests. Let's see who we have today. Might sound familiar to some of you. Others may be curious. With that, I'm inviting in today guests from the more than human world, the humpback whales, in honor of all water living beings who are endangered or lose their lives due to human actions. Today, specifically, we remember the tragic story of Toki, also known as Lolita, the orca who just died months before she was about to be released after 50 years of captivity. So we take a deep breath. And we hope that by entering them into their space, their memories, their names, that we honor them. And we are aware of the toll that humans take on the more than human world. And with that, welcome to Compassion Consortium Sunday Service. I'm Rev Sarah, and I'm joined today by co-founders Victoria Moran and Rev William, as well as Phil and Elaine. To ensure we don't have unwanted or disruptive guests, we've turned off some Zoom sharing functions. We'll put those on later during our fellowship period at the end of our service today. We meet for Sunday service once each month, and a reminder that starting in November, that will be the third, not the fourth Sunday. So please update your calendars. We are working around all of those holidays that stack up at the end of the year. If you're new to us, welcome. We are an interfaith, interspiritual, and interspecies community. Interfaith means we welcome people of any system of meaning making, and we feature a diverse range within our programming. Today, we are excited to have Shad Groverland with us to talk about New Thought Spirituality and the Unity Organization. Interspiritual is a term coined by Brother Wayne Teasdale, and it means that we believe underneath all of the world's religions and spiritual philosophies, we find commonalities, particularly shared values of peace, compassionate service, and love for the Earth community. And finally, we're interspecies. So we talk a lot about animals, and we consider the needs of the other than human beings who we share this planet with. At the beginning of each Sunday service, I offer an acknowledgement, drawing our awareness to beings who are indigenous to some specific habitat. Victoria and I just returned from Chicago, located on the traditional unceded homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, the Potawatomi, and many other peoples such as the Miami, the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, the Sac, and the Fox call the area of Chicago home. In fact, one of the largest urban American Indian communities in the United States resides in Chicago. And members continue to celebrate their heritage, to practice traditions, and care for the land and the waterways. And speaking of water, I'd be remiss not to mention some of the beings of Lake Michigan, the native lake trout, the whitefish, the yellow perch, the smallmouth bass, and the largemouth bass, and the bowfin. And I'm very curious, is there a certain size at which you become a small or a largemouth bass? I don't know. If anyone knows, chat me and let me know. Otherwise, I'll be Googling that after the service. Victoria and I were delighted to see a few of you in Chicago, as well as meet some of the more than 7,000 people from over 200 religious traditions from 95 countries who gathered for the Parliament of the World's Religions for over 800 presentations, ceremonies, plenaries, and observances over 5 jam-packed days. I'm grateful for the generosity shown during that week, from the Sikhs who fed the masses a free vegetarian lunch each day, a practice they call langar, to the eco-pagan who croned me in a surprise moment of humility, and I'm still working on living into my croning. Compassion Consortium offered an interfaith celebration for animals in conjunction with In Defense of Animals, the Spiritual Forum, and the Animal Interfaith Alliance, which was well attended. Victoria and I also offered presentations, and Victoria did some panels, as well as many other animal-centered organizations. We also had an exhibit booth, which got steady traffic for 38 hours. Each person who visited us was encouraged to choose a small plushy animal to wear on their bag to remind folks that the global ethics being discussed should include all species, not just humans. This, my friends, I think is a wombat. I'm not sure. I'm still working on who this is, but many of our creatures defied actual categorization as species, which was delightful. By the second day, a group of Buddhist college students began stopping by daily, or sometimes twice a day, to bring me flowers and pens made from recycled water bottles that said, "Go vegan," while they giggled and smiled and tried to teach me the Vietnamese words for all of the animals. I didn't do very well. Their English was much better than my Vietnamese. And gratitude to some of our animal chaplains who kept me well snacked. Be assured it was joyful, but there were also tough moments too, like the passionate young man who sought to educate me on the compassion of halal slaughter. That was a very interesting conversation. That was a very difficult conversation. On the fourth day, I finally snuck away from the booth for a presentation I could not miss out on. And I'm going to share that with you today before we move on. I listened to information from the Lingzhou Mountain Monastery. The session description in the book and in the app said this, quote, "The monastery's sides are covered by native plants and all kinds of animals such as tree frogs and eagles, squirrels, and wild boars are allowed to wander freely amongst the monastery's buildings. The nuns, the monks, the animals, and the natural environment depict a kind of harmony in coexistence and interdependence." They said squirrels, so I was in. Sitting attentively in a theater seat, I was treated to a short film about the monastery, and then listened to Rita Chen translate Master Zhang Yu Shi's, did the best I could with that, description of life there. My moment of bliss and insight came when she described founder and venerable Dharma master Hasin Tao's relationship with the ants there. He is so in tune with the goings-on of the different colonies at the monasteries that he can identify which group an ant was from, even when it was away from home. In addition, he fed the ants biscuits, or what we would refer to as cookies in the US, and reported back to the other monks and nuns that specific ants prefer different types of biscuits, so the staff was required to stock 5 kinds. The speaker of the presentation shared that the master's attentiveness caught on with other monks. But one day the Venerable had to correct one of them he saw feeding ants. Not because he didn't want others feeding the ants, not because it was the wrong biscuit type, but because the monk was feeding the ants too close to the road, and the Venerable was concerned for their future safety. Take a breath for a minute with me and think about your relationship to the tiny beings in your habitat. What is it like? Now, admittedly, most of us are not going to start feeding the ants we find on our kitchen counter special biscuits. I know I'm realistic about the impact of these sermon issues that I offer you all. I know I sometimes tread into territory that may seem strange or unreasonable, but I do this because I think the questions I'm asking are worthy ones for us as people who are advocates and activists. What would it mean to attend to each being around us with the same care that the Venerable did? Such concern, regardless of their size. What would it mean to spend enough time being mindful about the habitats of every being around you and care about their preferences? Not just non-harm, not just to remove suffering, but to care about their preferences. That's the inquiry I leave you all with today. I hope it will encourage you to be mindful of your relationships with the tiny beings throughout the next month. All right, that's it for me. Over to you, William.
Okay, so this is the point at which we read our tenets of agreement. We always start out by reading our tenets of agreement, which are very important to us. And we always start with that. And we always ask somebody from our congregation to share with us and to read the tenets. And so today, our tenets reader is Kimberly Winters. She's an international podcast host, vegan, public speaker, and coach. And her expertise is in navigating this non-vegan world practically with a solid foundation and an open heart. Her superpower is in making others feel safe to explore veganism. So Kimberly is host of the very popular podcast, www.didyoubringthehummus.com. And the mission of this is to inspire listeners to go vegan through powerful stories and meaningful conversation. So Kimberly is trained as a Reiki certified angelic training, and she's planning to join the Compassion Consortium Animal Chaplaincy training program this fall. And she lives in New Jersey with her husband and 4 cats. And so we do have in the chat her details as to how you can contact her. But right now, Phil, would you lead us through the tenets of agreement with Kimberly?
Our tenets of agreement. We acknowledge a divine force at the heart of the universe and in all living beings. We may refer to this force as God, but it is known by many names and appears in different forms or as formless. We recognize the common moral principles inherent within all wisdom traditions. We affirm that compassion, reverence for life, and nonviolence are fundamental to religious faith and moral philosophy and are to be extended to all sentient beings. We stand by the principles of inclusion, diversity, and equality and hold these as essential in our human relations. We hold that non-human animals are imbued with the same essence of life and love as our human animals, and that there is moral parity between us. We avow that humans do not own the earth, its resources, or its inhabitants, but instead must be involved in their protection and care. We endeavor to eat and live in a kind and sustainable manner, moving away from animal foods and animal-derived clothing, as well as any activities that cause harm to our fellow beings, human or otherwise. We aim to provide spiritual comfort, fellowship, and food for thought for those practicing or exploring a vegan lifestyle. We offer guidance and peer support for all those seeking a more compassionate and spiritual life. We commit to sharing these principles freely with humility and respect in support of non-human animals and the earth. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kimberly. So now we are going to do our interspecies practice for the day. And I have called this one Underwater Om Shanti. Let me explain. While we were at the Parliament, our exhibition booth that we were in was auspiciously next to a lovely group of people from the Brahma Kumaris, which is a spiritual path from India. It's notably female-led. Brahma meaning the creator of life, and Kumari meaning daughters, so daughters of the creator of life. They are affectionately known as the BKs, and they run a lovely retreat center in the Catskills of New York called Peace Village, where they teach open-eyed meditation. They encourage us to keep our eyes open so that we learn to cultivate a peaceful, meditative state that can be called up at any time. I've been fortunate to study with the BKs now for over a decade, and I can attest that open-eyed meditation is incredibly useful during times of stress or compassion fatigue or anger. Instead of having to leave the room to go meditate or close my eyes or get out of a space in which I'm feeling some angst, I can sink into a meditative calming of myself right where I am with no one noticing and bring my emotions back into balance. One way to do this is by just focusing softly on something in your sight. Today we'll be using a video. and attending to your breath using the words Om Shanti. Om being the sacred invocation, followed by Shanti, meaning peace. By saying Om Shanti, we invite peace into our bodies, our minds, our spirits. As advocates and activists, it is critical that we learn practices and skills for managing big emotions so that we can think and act clearly. That's why we do these spiritual practices with you. We hope they are useful in your life. So I invite you to try this 4-minute practice with me. Phil's going to play the video in just a second. As we take our focus underwater in hopes of bringing peace to ourselves and spreading it outside of us. And as always, the video will be posted on our YouTube channel in case you find it useful to practice after today. Take a final breath. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. May you be at peace. May you be at peace. That was only 4 minutes, folks. Notice how your body feels. If you're not used to mindfulness or meditation, it might have felt like an eternity. For some of you, if you are, you might have just wanted to stay there. Notice how this feels. And the next time you are truly angered or you are up about something, And you need to bring yourself back to balance before you speak or act. Let your eyes fuzz up a little bit. Just repeat with your eyes open in your head. May I be at peace. May I be at peace. May I be at peace. This works wonders in conference rooms and marriages, folks. All right, that's it for me with the interspecies practice. And now, Victoria, you're up.
Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to all participants and our wonderful special guest, Shad Groverland. We do seem to have a little extra time this week to discuss, for those of us who attended the Parliament of the World's Religions, our experience there. And before I bring in Shad, I'm just going to hopefully paint a picture for you of my great Parliament memory. It was the last evening, and I wanted to introduce a friend of many of ours, Dr. Milton Mills. He's been a participant in some Compassion Consortium events in the past, a medical doctor from Washington, D.C. And I said, Milton, may I introduce you to some new friends? This is a Muslim imam from Bosnia, now living in Detroit. This is a Hindu Brahmin from India, now working at the UN, living in New York. And the other gentleman I knew was a Hindu monk from the saffron robes. And I said, I'm so sorry, Swami, I don't know where you're from. And he said, the Himalayas. And I thought, this is just the most perfect thing on earth. Dr. Milton is a Seventh-day Adventist, and it was just, we had so many faiths and so many geographic areas coming together in peace and harmony and respect and interest in one another. It's one thing to say, it's okay that you live, and it's another thing to say, and you are really interesting. Tell me about how you see the world. So that was my great Parliament memory, and I'm just going to turn it over to Reverend Shad Groverland now, who is the CEO of Unity Worldwide Ministries. We're going to talk about unity and all kinds of stuff. But before we do that, give us your Parliament impression for this year.
Well, it was my first year attending the Parliament, so I didn't really know what to expect going in. And the first word that comes to mind is overwhelming. I mean, there was so much to do, so much to see, so much walking to get to the different things. So it took a couple of days to settle into the experience itself and really try to gauge what I wanted to see and interact with, and kind of pick a path, because you could do pretty much anything. I mean, at any point in time, there's 40 or 60 things going on at once. So really trying to find that. Once I kind of settled into that rhythm and looked for the things that kind of stayed along a different theme, then it started to make sense, because I could kind of just get a road I was going to walk, and that seemed to work. So it was amazing. Yes, and the Langar lunch was just absolutely phenomenal, and just seeing all these beautiful people was amazing. So I'm still processing so much of it. I'm not sure I have all the words yet.
Yeah, it changed me. It lasted a good 2 weeks, and now I have to do more meditation and positive thinking to extend it further. It seems that that's always what happens when you go somewhere amazing. So you actually hang out at some place amazing, Unity headquarters, Unity Village, which is the site of the 3rd annual Vegan Spirituality Conference. They're not calling it vegan this year. It's called Peace Begins With Me conference, happening in October. But all sorts of amazing things happen at Unity Village. And for so long, it's been the center of a beautiful movement of peace and healing, interestingly enough, founded by vegetarians. So please take us back to the 1890s, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the New Thought movement. What's that? Because it still sounds new.
Yeah, so I mean, we really go back to the mid 1800s. You have Dr. P.P. Quimby. He's a doctor. He's working with patients, and he's starting to realize that the way his patients think has more effect on their body and their health than the medicines he's giving them. And then on top of that, he starts to realize the way he thinks about his patients is also having an effect on their health. And so during this realization, he's shifting the way he approaches healing and medicine, less from I need to give you something to take to make yourself better, more to I need to sit with you and find out why your thinking is making you ill. And at the same time, he has to check his own thinking to make sure he's not holding him in an ill consciousness to help him stay ill. So that's sort of what we call the father of new thought. This was the new thought that our mind is actually a power source to create our life. It's not just affecting our body, it's affecting the affairs around us. So that was sort of one of these seed thoughts that blossomed into what we call new thought today. And then you have the founders of Unity coming on the scene, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. Myrtle, late 1800s, is dealing with a diagnosis of tuberculosis, and a lot of other illness she had had growing up. She gets exposed to this message, and specifically the statement that I am a child of God, I do not inherit sickness. So she starts working with this concept that if I am a child of God, and God is this all beautiful, powerful, divinely whole being, then I, as that child, inherit that same wholeness. So then it's something in my thinking that's making me unwell. So she's adopting the same concept that P.P. Quimby was working with, and now she starts working for 2 years on her consciousness. And some people think, oh, Myrtle did some work on her mind. No, she went at it for 2 years working on her consciousness. Coming out of that, she wound up healing herself of tuberculosis. Her husband, Charles, took notice and said, oh my goodness, this stuff is pretty powerful. So he started working on his own consciousness. And out of that started to blossom what we call today Unity. They started publishing. They brought the grounds here that we have at Unity Village. And they're really coming out of the idea that our mind is affecting the world around us. Our minds are connected, ergo together, we are creating this experience we call life. And that slowly segued into, well, if our minds are connected and we all feeling the compassion for each other, then aren't we also connected to the other living beings, which are these animals and these creatures around us, which segued into them moving away from eating meat. And so by today's standards, we would call them vegan at that time, but they didn't have that word yet. They were calling themselves vegetarians. That word didn't come until probably after Myrtle's passing. So they call themselves vegetarians, but they were vegans, practicing that to the point that they really found their connection to new thought through the Bible. So some people refer to us as the Christian wing of new thought. Since they were very rooted in the Bible, they had a very strong connection to the Bible. So they put these two things together and started printing possibly what was the first vegan Bible. It was not bound in leather. They started printing that Bible so that people could read a Bible without touching animal skin as they did that. And they created a whole vegan department. It wasn't called vegan back then, but that's what we call it today, to help people with their diets and around spirituality. And they connected those two things together. And Charles, her husband, will come to talk about that what we eat, we are ingesting the consciousness of that into our body. And when you ingest the consciousness of something that was harmed or went through suffering, then you are ingesting that same consciousness into your body when you eat that life form. So it was a very serious thing for them, but that's the gist of how it got going.
So many people hear about this, so many vegetarians and vegans, and they say, I've been looking for a spiritual home. I'm going to look up the Unity Church in my town. And then they go there and don't find vegetarians and vegans. What happened?
What happened? So they went through a time where they were very strict about that. And some might even say they're a little bit dogmatic about it, that, you've got to do this thing. They loosened up over time, and they started to recognize that this really has to be someone's personal choice. Probably like many of us have discovered, if you try to force your belief on someone, they'll actually go the opposite direction. And I think they might have found that same thing. So this became something is a part of Unity, but it wasn't mandated by Unity anymore. So they grew out of that, and after their passing, the generations that came after that, it was always left up to be a choice. And that choice seemed to go more towards eating meat again, back in the Unity movement. So that's somewhat where we are today. So you have groups of ministers, you have groups of congregants, different people throughout Unity that are, might say, Fillmorian and really holding on to, we're not supposed to be eating meat. You have the people in the middle that say, yeah, we see the value in that, but it's not something we're going to put upon anybody. And then you have those that say, that was kind of a thing just for the Fillmores. That wasn't really Unity, that was their thing. we've grown out of that, and we've moved on, and everything in between. So it's an interesting time where we have the flexibility to choose what is our diet between ourselves and God. It's not mandated by an authority figure at Unity, but it is something that we're trying to bring the conversation back to at least talk about again. Because I'll speak for myself. I haven't heard that conversation happening in Unity outside of the church I grew up in, which was raised by my parents who raised me, which would obviously have led me to vegetarian veganism, which was obviously slanted in that direction. So it's just something I feel we should be talking about it. And whatever you do with that information, I think it's valuable to have that conversation. And so as I travel throughout Unity Ministries, when I speak on Sunday, I often just bring up that I am vegan, that this was a part of our founder's history. That's just something to consider.
So let's talk a little bit about the spiritual healing that you brought up earlier. One of the panels that I attended at the Parliament was called the Matriarchs of New Thought. And I knew that Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, had been ill. I didn't know that the founder of Divine Science and pretty much every train of New Thought came out of somebody needing healing. And I remember I was raised by somebody who had been in Unity way back. She was a grandmother age person when I was an infant. So she actually had met Myrtle, Fillmore, knew Charles. And she would say, well, unlike in Christian Science, in Unity, you can go to a doctor if you don't have enough faith to heal yourself. And that's not what you'd hear today. And I also remember one of my first ministers, Dr. Ernest Wilson, would always say, go first to God and then to man as God directs. Pardon the sexist language, it was the 60s. But now I'm just not seeing that to the degree that I did years ago. So if we want to find that, or if we want to employ this kind of really powerful spiritual healing in our lives, how do we start?
Well, this is a very triggering topic for a lot of people. I mean, veganism and health, I might think the two, let's just throw politics into it and hit everyone's triggers while we're at it. So, I mean, health can be highly triggering because it's all about our bodies and the choices we've made for our bodies. And so we're very attached to those choices we have made. So I actually spoke about this morning at Unity Temple in the Plaza, about our founders, about Phineas Parker Quimby, and this theology that we do have the power to heal our body. So at this point in time, we've had modern science, we've had the media, we've had pharmaceutical companies, we've had the American Medical Association, we've had all these organizations come in and start weighing in on what is health and how do you have a healthy body. And not all these organizations and all these people necessarily have a deep spiritual practice. They're normal everyday people going about doing the best things they can with the information they have, but they have very strong opinions on what health means for you. And the Fillmores and these early New Thought founders, the ones you talk about that heal themselves, they really started to reclaim health for themselves. And sometimes would say, do not hand your health over or your power over to an authority figure. They might have advice, they might have expertise that could help you along the journey, but the power and the final decision always relies with you. That's where the power should always be. So it's between you and God. But what we have to caution is we've moved so, I get called out for saying we. I have recognized some people have moved so far away from this power within ourselves that they're now in a system where they're dependent on outside help to keep themselves going. And so we can start talking about there is this potential to reclaim our health, to reclaim our power. And there's a gap we're going to have to journey between where we are now and where we want to be, which is that ability to heal ourselves with our mind. So we look at Myrtle. She was very dependent on medical intervention to stay alive when she heard these powerful words of taking her power back. And it took her 2 years to travel that journey, working daily for hours on that process. They even talk about she pretty much handed her children over to her husband's mother to care for during that time, so she had enough time to heal herself, because she saw so much value in being alive for the rest of their lives that she was going to dedicate that time. So this is a dedicated work to be able to take our consciousness back to a place where we believe we do have this power in many ways, a belief that's been handed off to outside organizations to take care of for us. So I don't know if that makes sense, but we've sort of handed our power away, and the process of getting it back is going to take work. So that's not to say we need to cut off our doctors and cut off our medication and don't do this and don't do that. No, these are all tools on this path as we start this process of journeying back to reclaiming our power to be able to heal ourselves. With most scenarios, in some scenarios, we still might need to have intervention and help from outside sources. So I just think it's a journey to work back there. And this is, again, a conversation we're starting to have in Unity. Just bring back the conversation about this is a real thing. It's a potential we can work towards, and maybe it's time to start that process again.
So if someone wanted a book or some sort of information, if they want to embark on this healing journey, what would you recommend?
Well, you talk about Myrtle's Healing Letters is a really popular book. It's kind of the book that most people read, and that gives them the flavor for unity. And it is a compilation of letters that Myrtle would write to people that were writing to her after she healed herself, inquiring about, how do I do this? How do I do that? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And she responds, and these are her responses to those letters. And you get to hear in her own words, her journey and her beliefs about health. And I love reading it because she was a very straightforward woman, and she called people out. She called it like it is. You could hear that power within her. And sometimes you'd hear a little bit of frustration when she would hear people's lack of power again in that space. She'd want them to call out. She'd want to call them up. She wanted to hear you speak to power again. So that book for many people has become sort of the initial step on their healing journey. To really read those words from a woman that did that work in her own voice, not just talking about her, but her talking. And there's such amazing nuggets in there that will just flip your brain upside down and go, is this even possible? That's coming from a woman that says, not only is it possible, I'm telling you, I did it. And it's short. I like short books. It's a quick read, and you get beautiful nuggets throughout.
Oh, that's such a great story. So if somebody is interested in getting some help with this, certainly you have the most beautiful and probably longest standing prayer ministry in the world. Silent Unity, you can go online, you can call a toll-free number, and you can get help. These people are beautiful, and I've actually seen miracles in my life with Silent Unity. And if someone reaches out to them and they come from a different religious tradition, they might say, these Unity people pray funny. How do you pray that's different from other praying people?
Well, we call it affirmative prayer, where we're not going to pray into the fear or pray into the sickness or the illness. It's really praying into the affirmation of your wholeness. The Silent Unity prayer individuals and prayer partners are really trained to be able to pray with anyone and honoring the faith from which they're calling from in that space. So it might sound a little bit different, but they do their best to make the prayer relevant to the faith of the person who's calling. But it is a positive prayer. So we don't want to dwell on a situation or dwell on whatever might be the ailment or the difficulty at the time. We want to shift that towards our inherent wholeness. So if we are children of God, we are inherently divine. We want to switch back into that trueness of our being. So that's what affirmative or positive prayer is staying in that space, affirming who we truly are, to remind us, like Quimby was doing with his patients, reminding us what we actually are, which is we are whole, we are healthy. It's just a matter of peeling back the layers of this onion of chaos and fear and negativity and programming to get back to our true nature, which is that divine or that Christ within. We refer to it as in unity.
So back a little bit to the vegan history. I know the Fillmores cared about animals. They saw the oneness of all life, but they were also very invested in the idea that what we consume has a lot to do with our spiritual lives and what we can manifest, how much we can grow spiritually. So what's that connection in their opinion and or yours?
So from my perspective of their opinion, they saw a direct connection between how you're eating and your experience of life. Myrtle actually had a dietitian that worked with her. So they're living in the Lee Summit area, which is where Kansas City is, a little bit south of Kansas City itself. She had a dietitian in Kansas City that was helping her along this journey of what fruits and vegetables to eat to keep her in alignment with her body, keep her in balance. So it was a weekly part of her life, keeping her diet in alignment, to have a person that might be a little bit further along in the journey to help her put together this diet so she wasn't just going at it alone. And then she in turn was working with Charles, and it was so big to them that they were making an effort to make anything served at potlucks or events that were happening on site to also be vegan or vegetarian, as they call it in the time. And there's even a little talk that they had one of the first veggie hot dog making machines here on property. So they were making veggie hot dogs long before it was hip or packaged or processed, just out of what the materials they had on site. So that this was really an epicenter of their belief system. Now, for me, in my life, I have found it incredibly important for my spiritual journey. I have found it not in that it requires me not to eat meat to be spiritual, but the more meditation I do, the more practice I do, the less I could engage in those type of things. And I liken it to a story I read about the Guru Yogananda, who came to the United States in the 1950s-ish, and was doing this work, and he had a young person come to him and said, well, if I join you on this path, Yogananda, will I have to give up smoking? Yogananda said no. He said, well, I have to give up drinking. Yogananda said no. He said, well, I have to give up all the type of eating to do. And Yogananda said no. He said, well, I have to give up the womanizing I do. And Yogananda said no. But Yogananda said, but I can't guarantee that on this path you won't wind up wanting to. And that's how I've likened my journey to this process. As I've gone down this path, there are things I can no longer do because they no longer align with my vibration. I can't speak to someone else's path and what's going to be on their journey, but I've given up alcohol, I've given up meat, I've given up just a lot of things on this process where they just no longer aligned with where I was on this journey. But I can't speak to someone else's journey because that's between them and the divine. And so for me to get into proselytizing and say, you have to do this, again, they go, no, I don't, and go in the other direction. They might be having a different journey. So that's just been my experience.
So what's it like to be in a high position in a recognized denomination in the United States, and you're the vegan guy?
It's quite fascinating because you recognize that people don't know what a vegan microaggression is. And so even in my position as we travel, we have to let ministries know, if you're going to feed us when we get on site, just make sure you have some vegan options. If you're going to take us out to dinner, make sure we're going to a vegan friendly place. And many times we'll sit down with congregants just to have a potluck with them or something. And you can't avoid the topic coming up. Someone's going to notice you're not eating meat, and it's going to come up. And the microaggressions just start. And they don't know that's what it is. They say, oh, I was vegan for a hot second, but then I realized it's not healthy and I went back to eating meat. Or I did XXYZ and my doctor told me that's not a healthy way to live, so I went back to eating meat. Or I lost energy, or I was cold, and it's almost always some sort of story of a relationship to someone who went vegan. It made them unhealthy and they were saved by meat. And you hear it over and over again. You realize, well, that's an attack on me. It's an attack on the way I live. And you don't hear that because meat has been so normalized in the experience, especially in this culture, that that's just normal talk. But it's like saying, oh, I had the same eye color you used to have, but I found out that made me less intelligent, so I put in brown contacts or whatever it might be. And you'd be like, well, that was not very nice. But those conversations happen a lot. And my wife and I, we just, kind of smile and we kind of just go with it. Sometimes we'll call it out and say, that didn't really land that well with me. I don't know if you heard how that landed. We'll add little tidbits if someone talks about, well, you can't get your iron with that diet. And I'll share a little story how I went and gave blood next to a friend of mine, and she couldn't give blood because her iron was too low, and she ate tons of red meat, and my iron was just fine, and she was upset, and she was arguing with her doctor saying, why can he give blood but I can't? He doesn't eat meat. And everybody was confused, and it's a whole thing, but clearly I was okay with iron. You just try to sort of make a conversation light about a little learning curve, but it's fascinating to see that as we've traveled around, there is this bias against vegans and vegetarians. It's an unconscious bias. And it's a thing that it just stands out more and more the more you involve yourself in these type of occasions with people that are very loving, beautiful people, but there's just this unawareness that we've normalized a thing and we've othered another thing. So it's okay to make fun of vegans. It's okay to sort of put them down to their face because we don't even know we're doing it because meat and milk has been normalized.
Interesting. So I'm so glad that you're brave and that you're just willing to keep going out there and doing all the great things that you do. And as our time together winds down, would you be willing to close for us with a lovely prayer?
Certainly. So I should invite you, if you're comfortable, if you want to close your eyes. If you can get your spine straight and allow yourself to center. If you can become still enough just to feel that resonance traveling throughout your body. Might be a tingling at your feet, at your palms, in your spine. Recognize that as source, as God, as the life that flows in and through all of us and each of us. If we can slow down just enough to come in contact with that. It's a reminder that it's not specific just to me. The same force flows in and through all things. And we're just called to be mindful, become aware and present. And to be allowed to make our own choices in this world. How we choose to show up. How we choose to design our own path of health and wholeness. How we eat, how we engage, how we share and grow. We've been empowered with a choice. Sometimes just by slowing down and tapping in and feeling this little tingle of life will help us make that next choice. And so in gratitude to the God outside, beside, and inside as me, we give thanks. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Shad. I hope you can stay and be in one of our breakout rooms for some lucky people that might get to know you better that way. Thank you so very much for being part of this today. And now I'll turn it over to Reverend William and the Song of Compassion.
Today, we have a song of compassion, which I am so excited about. This is by the French composer Camille Saint-Saëns, composed Le Carnaval des Animaux, meaning the carnival of the animals. Anyway, I kind of got through that. This was written in 1886 while Camille was taking a vacation in a small Austrian village. And so he ended up writing this whimsical suite with 14 different movements. And each one features an animal or a group of animals. And so today we are going to share the final segment because there's like 14 of these. So we're going to share the final segment today, what's called the finale. And so we want you to enjoy this. And I think once you see it, you'll understand why we are so excited about it. And so you can also enjoy the other segments. There's 14 segments, and each one of them is about a different kind of animal, and it's a different musical interpretation of these animals. It's a 22-minute video. And so to watch the entire video, which is only 20 minutes, and you will love it, you just need to go to the YouTube link, which Sarah has put into the chat. Believe me, you will really love this. So right now, though, Phil is going to share with us the Carnival of the Animals, the finale. Right. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. And now we move on to, I believe, Elaine is going to be moving on to an interview with Diane.
Thank you, Reverend William, and thank you for those glorious images and equally amazing music. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Compassion in Action. Today, we're speaking with Diane Waltner, a Wichita-based animal activist, author, vegan, recent graduate of our animal chaplaincy program, and human guardian to a wonderful feline soul named Mandy. Welcome, Diane. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Elaine. It's a real honor to be here.
Well, first, I'd like to ask you about your book, Evolving into Wholeness, A Journey into Compassion. In it, you mentioned there was a great disconnect between the peace testimony of the Mennonite faith you were brought up in and the violence that was done to animals in your family poultry hatchery. What was it that woke you up to the cruelty that had literally been in front of you all those years?
Well, there weren't really any specific incidences that I can remember. It was more of a gradual awakening. And while I was still at home and working in the hatchery, it was not something that I really wanted to think about. You just kind of numb, you get pretty numbed pretty quickly, unfortunately, when you have to do these things. And I thought it was necessary because I thought we needed to eat meat. And I thought, this was just necessary evil, what we had to do at the hatchery, but I didn't know that there was an alternative. After I left home and after I started thinking about things and I wasn't involved in the middle of it anymore and wasn't working at the hatchery, it was easier to look back on it and see, all of the cruelty was so unnecessary, and we don't have to have animals to eat. And so that's what I started questioning, if we're such a peaceful, peace-loving people, that this just didn't seem quite right to cause all that suffering.
It's interesting that you got a clearer perspective the further away you were from it. Also in your book, you're very upfront about your addiction to drinking as a way to deal with the inner pain you experienced from bullying as a child and as a young adult. Why do you think addiction of any substance is so stigmatized in our society, and what can we do to help change that viewpoint?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, it's always been stigmatized, and I have to admit that I used to look down on people who use drugs and alcohol and, think, why can't they control themselves, or why do they do these stupid things? And then I found myself, when I was drinking, I would find myself thinking, why did I do that? Why can't I stop my drinking? Why can't I control why can't I stop after 1 or 2 drinks? So I felt that there must be something wrong with me, like I had previously thought that there must be something wrong, something defective with these people who were addicted. And I think that's that's a common idea, and there's so much shame involved with it. And I was so ashamed of myself. And when I was writing the book, I really debated about how much to even disclose, because I was worried about what people would think of me. But as they say, you're only as sick as your secrets. So I felt that it was important to talk about some of these things. Plus, I really wanted to normalize sobriety and to normalize talking about our struggles with addiction, because I want to help to destigmatize it, because I know a couple of friends who I lost, one to death and one to dementia, largely because they were too ashamed to talk about their drinking and too ashamed to get help, or didn't want to get help. But I think if they had been able to talk about it, it would have been a little easier for them to save their lives. And we can't solve a problem that we can't discuss. So that was part of my reason in writing the book. And I think that we need to just recognize that the addict is a person, and that their drinking or using is just their coping mechanism. We all have coping mechanisms, and some of us just choose mechanisms that are more harmful and less helpful. So we can relearn those. But I think it's because I still struggle with eating, especially sugar. So I still have some of those coping mechanisms. But I think it's important to be non-judgmental and to be willing to listen. And for those who are struggling, to be willing to talk about our struggles with addiction.
Well, you also mentioned that you became a vegan before you became sober. How did your veganism help you on the path to sobriety?
Well, when I was drinking, I drank a lot to cope with the painful feelings, and I had a lot of painful feelings related to the cognitive dissonance I felt, feeling that I should be, that I was a compassionate person, yet here I was contributing to all the suffering and death of all these animals that I was eating and their animal products that I was consuming. And so once I stopped doing that, that did give me a tremendous sense of inner peace. And so that helped reduce my need for the alcohol to deal with painful feelings. And then the compassion for animals that I had felt for animals, I was starting to feel for myself as well. That was a little harder to come, but I began to be a little concerned about my health, because I was having some symptoms and some blood work that said that maybe I should reconsider my drinking, because what I really wanted to do, I felt really called to help speak out for the animals. And I knew that I needed to be healthy to do that. And I didn't want to follow the footsteps of my friends. And so I thought, I had something to live for now. I didn't want to die. And so working for the animals became a cause that was more important to me than drinking.
That compassion for animals, that vegan compassion, how do you these days extend that to humans?
Well, and that's where the animal chaplaincy training will be helpful, because I do want to be available to help people cope with the loss of their animal companions, and to work with them to create funerals or memorials and to process the grief after the loss. I would also like to be available to provide a safe space for anyone else who has been involved in animal exploitive industries, whether it's in factory farming or farming at all, or research or any other things, because to help them deal with any grief or guilt or shame that they may be feeling, then provide emotional and spiritual support for anyone going through that transition, because I know how painful it is. There for a lot of years, I wouldn't talk to anybody, even when I was starting to become active in the animal rights movement. I wouldn't talk to any of my activist friends about my background, because I was too ashamed and too afraid that I would be condemned for what I had done, because I had seen activists do that to other former animal exploiters. And so I want to be available for anybody who is trying to deal with the guilt and shame of working in those industries and trying to escape it. Then I also want to continue my education to learn other ways to help. And I'm registered for an animal companion end-of-life doula certification program and an animal Reiki level 1 training. And while those are obviously more working with the animals, having that knowledge will certainly be helpful to humans as well, and to help with the end-of-life discernment issues. And then also, finally, just compassion for other addicts. Life is hard, and we all need some way to cope with the stresses of life. And I would venture to say that we all have used some harmful coping mechanisms at times. And as I mentioned, I'm still struggling with food, especially sugar addiction. And I did briefly experiment with a few other drugs, but since alcohol was convenient, that quickly became my drug of choice. But I think we just need to have compassion for everyone.
Well, I think there's a lot of lucky humans and a lot of fortunate animals waiting in your future ministry. Also, I guess one last question. How are you planning to incorporate your chaplaincy training into your actual animal activism?
Well, I've been invited by my minister at my Unity Church to do a church service in October. So I'm working on that. And I will also be working with her on a Blessing of the Animals service the week following my service. So I'm thinking about creating a presentation for that would be easily adaptable to other faith traditions, and offering it to present it to other churches, starting particularly seeing if I could interest the Unitarian Universalist Church, because I was actively involved there for a number of years as well. Then I'm also a vegan lifestyle coach and educator through Main Street Vegan Academy, which I also highly recommend. It's a wonderful program. And I have included information about that on my website, as well as my chaplaincy. And so I'm hoping that people who come to the website in search of chaplaincy information will also see then the veganism coaching information, and maybe be interested. Maybe that will help open the door to them to consider compassion, expanding their compassion to other animals. So I'm also available to help people in their vegan journeys, as well as anything related directly to the chaplaincy.
Well, Diane, thank you so much for being with us again, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I personally can attest to your effectiveness as a chaplain. You helped me greatly during the loss of my little dog. And I know you're going to help so many other people and animals.
Thank you
Reverend
so
Sarah?
much.
You're welcome. Reverend Sarah, back to you.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Diane. It's so delightful to hear about how everything is coming together for you, Diane. And for folks who are not actually watching the chat today, if you have chat off, just want to let you know there's a couple notes in there. If anyone in this community is struggling with addiction, we've put a couple of resources in there as well as Diane's book. This month, as in every month, Our world has witnessed a whole lot of losses. Diane just mentioned some losses, and I think we've been mentioning losses throughout the entire service as we usually do. But we turn to blessings and prayers now. And so I'm going to ask Phil to open the chat for folks. And, if you would like blessings or prayers, requests for anyone who has passed on to whatever is next after this beingness, please feel free to enter those in the chat. We take those, we witness those. We hold you in prayer even after this service. So please feel free to enter that into the chat. And in addition to what you might put in the chat, I'm going to add Toki the Orca back in. There's also been a request to hold those who know and loved Bob Barker in prayer. He did a lot of work for animals. And he was part of our formative TV watching for many of us for many years. I'll add prayers for the people, the animals, and the land of Maui, those who were lost and those who are recovering. Right now, wildfires burn in 14 states in the U.S. Ask that beings there might find safety. And I know that our list could go on and on and on for hours, couldn't it, of all of the losses that happen in the world. Blessings and prayers are a way of honoring lives. And some religions tell us they are a way to help beings on to their next incarnation or to their next home. So we hold that as possible. We hold that as something that may be possible. And today I'm delighted to introduce another animal chaplain to continue us on this blessing and prayer journey today, Reverend Ginny K. Makita, who is a certified animal-friendly attorney, an ordained interfaith minister, and animal chaplain. She's provided compassionate legal assistance to those whose voices have been silenced, animals, children, LGBTQ+ individuals, and incapacitated adults. So she has compassion for all of those whose voices have been silenced and works very hard for them for over 30 years. She's been recognized as one of Michigan's top 10 lawyers for her animal protection work and was recently awarded the State Bar of Michigan Animal Law Section's Brandy Award. Congratulations, Ginny. Ginny is the founder of Animal Blessings, a nonprofit organization dedicated to honoring the sacred worth of all animals, animals with whom we share our lives, captive animals exploited by humans for food and clothing and entertainment and other stuff, and wild animals who are hunted or at the risk of extinction. So welcome, Ginny. The floor is yours. And all of you who've put prayers into the chat know that I am taking those with me and will be working with those this week for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the invitation to share with you this time of meditation and blessing for a creature that I have grown to love since a visit to Acadia National Park in Maine last fall. I'm wearing my collar and my stole because I wanted to share with you, and I'm hoping you'll be able to see this. There we go. The embroidered lobster that's on the bottom of the stole. I would venture to guess that it's probably more likely than not that it's probably one of the only clerical stoles with a lobster on the bottom. Earlier this year, while I was enrolled in the animal chaplaincy training program, Rev Sarah invited us to offer a blessing to an animal. And so I chose a lobster that was in a tank at my local grocery store. In the chaos of bad pop music and noise, I went up and actually videotaped myself doing that as part of the assignment for this precious being whose life was valued at $34.99. In a moment, you're going to see a video clip, the longer version of which I really encourage you to watch when you have time, in which a female lobster is molting. And I thought I would share with you that lobsters grow by molting. This is a process in which they struggle out of their old shells while absorbing water, which expands their body size. This molting or shell shedding occurs 25 times in the first 5 to 7 years of a lobster's life. And then they molt once a year or every 2 years throughout adulthood. Because lobsters molt, they can regenerate their lost limbs. Each time a new molt is formed, the regenerating limb looks more like the original. Lobsters can even regenerate their eyes and their antenna. And I'm going to ask Phil now to show a short 1-minute clip of a lobster molting. It occurred to me as I watched this beautiful video, and particularly this clip, and I shared this with Rev Sarah, that we engage in spiritual molting throughout our lives. I am so grateful to the Compassion Consortium for providing a portal into which people can shed their own old notions regarding our relationships with animals with whom we share this planet, many of which were taught to us by the churches and faith communities in which we were raised and belonged. Now I invite you to close your eyes or soften your gaze and take the deepest breath you've taken all day. And Phil, there's a photo, if you can, I don't know if there's a way to put that up. That'd be great. Just in case you've got your eyes open, you can focus on this beautiful being. All right. The weight, and actually I should share with you, this invitation is to imagine yourself as a lobster. The weight of the water all around you feels like the most complete embrace. The water comforts every part of your body equally and thoroughly. Nowhere in your body can you feel any aches or pains, only the embrace of the cool salt water. Your body is alert, and despite your knight-like appearance, you are actually sensitive and delicate. Although you can't see or hear very well, you do have an exquisite sense of touch, thanks to your antenna and hundreds of thousands of tiny hairs that stick out from the gaps in your shell. As you effortlessly crawl, there is no sense of gravity, no up or down, there's just the ground, and that's what holds your attention. You gaze off into the expanse, looking at the colors and textures on the seafloor. Your eye shows a remarkable geometry not found anywhere else in nature. It has tiny facets that are perfectly square, so it looks like perfect graph paper. This is needed because your eye focuses light by reflection, unlike most other eyes that reflect and focus by refraction. The graph paper appearance is caused by the ends of many tiny square tubes on a spherical surface. The sides of the tube are very flat and shiny mirrors, and their precise geometrical arrangement means that parallel light rays are all reflected to a focus. The square arrangement is crucial because only with the reflectors at right angles can it form an image from light rays from any direction. Not only does your eye have all the earmarks of being designed by a master divine designer, it has also inspired human astronomers in developing telescopes. You look and wait for movement. Your eyes catch the light bouncing from the ground, seeking out plants, sponges, and crab lurking beneath the sand. You smell your food by using 4 small antennae on the top of your head and tiny sensing hairs that cover your body. Your sense of smell is so fine you can sniff out a single amino acid that tags your favorite food. In addition, your claws are much more than just sharp defensive tools. You can favor their left or right limb or be ambidextrous, just like humans. And your claws possess sensitive receptors, which you also use to detect food. Luckily for you today, there are plenty of your favorite plants nearby, And your chemosensory hairs on your 2 sets of front walking legs immediately behind your claws have many taste sensors. You chew these delicious plants with teeth located in your stomach about the size of a walnut, located right behind your eyes. You sway with the current. No tremors appear on the ground, so you move into new territory. You inhale a full breath of water through your gills at the base of your back legs, blood-filled feathery organs which extract oxygen from water and land. You exhale into motion, gliding along the ocean floor, in and out gracefully, quickly and efficiently with your own water jet propulsion. You approach an area where you marvel at the vibrant environment, rocks of different sizes, corals and shells, all pulsating with colors. In case there are predators nearby, you blend into the environment for safer observation. When you are sure the coast is clear, you venture out. Again, the weight of the cool ocean water embraces you, and today you are graced with a beam of sunlight into which you swim, reminding you of the divine spark that created you and energizes your days. May it be so. You may breathe your eyes open.
Jenny, thank you. We started today talking about how much attention we could have on tiny beings, and you just showed us one beautiful, beautiful way to do that. Thank you for so much detail and just how this feels. So I will ask Phil to bring up our closing prayer, and we will extend beyond lobsters, beyond ants, beyond all of the other beings that we have talked about today, including them, of course, but extend beyond them. And if you would share these words aloud or silently with me at the same time as I read them, please. May all creatures everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and actions of our lives contribute to this happiness and this freedom for all. May it be so. Amen. So mote it be. Amen. Whatever your closing word is. Thank you for joining us for today's Sunday service, but don't go anywhere yet, please. William's got a couple of important announcements for you.
Here I am, right? I am here.
You are here.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so what I would like to do is now just let you know what's happening up in the future and things that might be interesting to you. So let me just, okay, so we're going to show some slides while I kind of run through the future of our events. And so one thing that I should just mention quickly, because I think Rev Sarah has already said it, and that is we are actually changing the schedule for our services so that starting on November 9th, they will be commencing on November 19th and on the third month. And so I think you already knew that. So then the next thing is I'd like to share with you is, and Phil, this is slide number 6. It's about our next event, our next service. And so our next spiritual guest on September 24th will be David Simon. Dave is the chair of the Compassion Consortium Advisory Board. He's a vegan lawyer, a writer, and activist, and the author of the excellent book Meatonomics, which looks at how to fix the broken market for animal foods in the U.S. His legal work on behalf of animals and animal advocates has included lawsuits against rodeos, a horse racetrack, a marine park, the U.S. Coast Guard, and for foie gras producers and retailers. So in addition, Reverend Carol Saunders will also join us as our Compassion in Action guest. And Reverend Carol is a member of our advisory board and an ordained Unity and Interfaith minister, founder host of the Spiritual Forum, which is a podcast ministry in Chicago, and the author of Wolf and the Lamb, and author compiler of the booklet, The Forgotten Teachings of Charles Fillmore. So she also is the organizer of the upcoming Vegan Spirituality Peace Begins With Me Forum and retreat at Unity Village, held at Unity Village on October 29th through the 22nd. So you'll see Sarah has put that into the chat. And then the next slide is our Compassion Consortium for our engaged member practice will be on September 18th, and Reverend Sarah will lead our engaged member practice, Loving Kindness for All Beings. So our next slide 8 is that, as I just said, the annual fall retreat Peace Begins With Me will be at the Unity Village on October 29th to the 22nd. Days and 3 nights of workshops, tools, and practices for creating a whole planet spirituality. And our featured guest will be Renee King of the Rowdy Girl Sanctuary. And again, you'll see this in the chat. So the Compassion Consortium enrollment for the next Animal Chaplaincy Training class commences for the fall in 2023 cohort. So please check that out. And then the Main Street Vegan Academy starts its 12th year. And it was conceived by 2011 by Compassion Consortium co-founder Victor Moran. And the Main Street Vegan Academy now has more than 600 graduates on 6 continents, working as vegan entrepreneurs, coaches, writers, and influencers. So the course starts in September, 7 full weekend days, and you can become a certified vegan coach. And so that is pretty much what's coming up for us. And there's a lot of great things for you to kind of consider and hopefully maybe participate in.